everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today I am doing my September wrap up, but this is going to be a little bit different than my usual wrap ups because it's actually not the end of September yet. I decided that instead of doing like one giant wrap up at the end of the month, I was just going to film over the course of September, put it on one video, and just share with you the books that I'm reading so that I remember what I felt about those books in the moment instead of trying to jog my memory a month later. So today it's currently September 14th, so it's about halfway through the month. And I wanted to share with you the books that I've picked up this month, the books that I've read. And I'm also going to be sharing with you the books that I have DNFed this month, which I guess will lead me to my first book that I attempted to pick up this month, which was Stephen King's The Shining. I can't hold this book for the whole video. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I have been on a huge Stephen King reading kick. I recently had my Carrie reading vlog, which is the first book in my bind up of his works. And I really wanted to read The Shining as my next Stephen King novel. And my goal was to get a Shining reading vlog out by the end of this month. But I got like a couple chapters in and I was just getting so slumpy. I've just been in the weirdest reading mood this month where like the second I pick up a book that I don't want to read, I just am instantly turned off by it. And I'm also just like really not in the mood for long books. So I decided to table The Shining and maybe pick it up at some time a little bit later, or possibly pick up a shorter Stephen King novel, but I was really bummed that I'm not going to get to it this month. So even though I decided to table The Shining, I was already listening to an audiobook at the time at the end of August, and I finished it at the beginning of September, and it is called, let me see if I can actually remember the name, but it's Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones by James Clear. I decided to pick this book up because I've just been really struggling with finding motivation, especially during this time in quarantine when I've just been stuck inside and working a lot less now than I used to. I decided to give this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The audiobook wasn't bad. It was pretty short, so I got through pretty quickly. But there was nothing about this book that I thought was like extra revolutionary, and I felt like, this sounds mean, but a lot of the things that he was talking about in this book, I feel like you can just find online, or kind of just like, duh, like of course, like how do people not know that already? And I feel like if you are looking for motivation, reading an entire book when you can just go and read a blog post online that's a lot shorter and gets to the point, I feel like it's just more efficient. So I did pick up a little bit from the book, but I think what I was really struggling with was that this book was talking about being more motivated and creating better habits. But my whole thing was, what if you can't even like get out of bed to create those habits in the first place? And he didn't really start from there. Like, for example, there was one tip that he gave if you want to work out more. It's a very basic thing of, put your workout clothes out the night before so that they're there in the morning. But it's like, what if you have no motivation where you can't even go to your closet and get your workout clothes to begin with? And I know that sounds really crazy, but a lot of people struggle with just that basic need to want to change. And I feel like he didn't cover that. And that's something that I've really been struggling with. So ultimately, it's not a bad book if you know like nothing about motivation or goal setting or creating good habits. Then pick it up. It's a decent read. But also my job we talk about this kind of stuff a lot, so I knew most of the things in the book, which is why I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. So when I DNF'd The Shining, I needed a new physical book to read, and I actually already owned this book, so I decided to pick up A Woman Is No Man, which I forgot to look up how to pronounce the author's name, but this is the author, and I absolutely love this book. I'm kind of struggling in like how to actually rate it. It's between like a 4 and a 5 stars for me, but oh god, how do I even describe this book? It is about this girl who is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants, and she lives out in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, and it's a really amazing story of cross-generational. So you go back and forth between the timeline of her mother, who came over to this country after she was in an arranged marriage, and then it flips back to like, so that was in 1990, and then it flips back to like present day 2008 with the 17-year-old main character Dea, and it kind of just like talks about the experiences of being an immigrant in this country, arranged marriages, also just being from Palestine and Muslim American, and it kind of is just really portraying the differences in generations between Dea and Isra, which is her mother. Dea struggles a lot with her identity and trying to figure out what she wants for her own life instead of what her family wants for her. And she learns a lot about her mom and her mom's past and history, and doesn't want to repeat what happened to her mother. And so it's just her coming to terms and reckoning of what she wants for her future, and also how to deal with her family who is going to disapprove of her choices. And it just shows the difference between her mom and her generation and her, and how different it is. And I feel like I'm not selling the book really well, but it's honestly a really amazing read. It's a pretty fast read. It's a little over 300 pages, like 340 pages. And I have not been reading fiction. I don't know why, like I'm just in a really big nonfiction mood, and this book is fiction, and it just totally reminded me why I love fiction books, because you get so immersed in the characters, and I got so immersed in this family and the culture. And obviously I love the fact that this book was set in New York, but it was just such an amazing read. And I loved the ending, how, I'm not spoiling it, but how not all of the tiny little loose ends were tied up. I like how you got a satisfactory ending, but there were still a couple things that were left open to your imagination, which I really appreciate and like in books. But if you're looking for another fiction book and this sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend picking this one up. So after I finished Atomic Habits, I needed to pick up a new audiobook, so I decided to pick up Mindy Kaling's book called Why Not Me? And this is what Amazon says is the description of this book. So let me just share this with you. It says, in Why Not Me, Kaling shares insightful, deeply personal stories about falling in love at work, seeking new friendships in lonely places, attempting to be the first person in history to lose weight without any behavior modification whatsoever, and believing that you have a place in Hollywood when you're constantly reminded that no one looks like you. So I thought this book was going to be like a really inspirational account, and where she basically talked about all those things that I just read to you. And I was like listening to the audiobook, and I don't want to be mean again, but it was like the most shallow book I've like ever read. It was just like her talking about these things, which I feel like she could have had the opportunity to go deeper and to create more meaning behind the stories that she was saying, but I just feel like she was not executing that at all. Like she would tell this whole story, this like story about like being in a sorority, and it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna tell a story about that, then you should have like some sort of outcome or learning lesson or some, you know, something deep that came out of that. And I just feel like she just missed the mark every single time. And it was just like, I met people, but then I left the story because it wasn't for me. And you're like, okay, well, I didn't get anything from that story. So I decided to DNF this book because I just like wasn't getting anything out of it, and I was really disappointed. It wasn't funny at all either, and it wasn't meaningful and insightful. And I just feel like when you have the opportunity to publish a book, which not many people do, it's like you should take advantage of it. But yeah, I DNF'd Why Not Me, and but I am currently really liking the audiobook that I'm listening to now, which I'm not finished with it yet, but I will get into a little bit later. But let me go and move on to, I guess, the next physical book that I just read, which was literally 10 minutes ago when I finished it. And it was Ariel by Sylvia Plath, who is a famous poet who wrote The Bell Jar, which I read last year and really liked. Ariel is, I believe, her only poetry collection, and the reason why Sylvia Plath is as famous as she is today. So I didn't rate this book because it's poetry, and I honestly don't know how to rate poetry. I've been writing poetry ever since high school. I really like poetry. I don't love reading it though, which is like kind of weird that I like to write it, but I don't like to read it. And this was written, I believe, in the 50s, and this is not like an Urban Outfitters kind of poetry book like Milk and Honey, which, no shame, it's a great book, I read it, but these poems I just like couldn't connect to as much because I didn't know the subject matter behind them. I know a lot of the poems were talking about her husband's infidelity. I think her kids were also included, but just because I had no background information, I just had no idea what she was talking about, and it was just a little hard to connect with for me, which is probably why poetry kind of puts off a lot of people, because unless you can like get the literal meaning of the words, it's like, what am I actually reading? Obviously, if I had read this, let's say in class, where I had a teacher who was giving me a little bit of background on Sylvia Plath and Ariel and the poems within Ariel, maybe I would have appreciated it more, but I'm just gonna say it was okay. Again, not into really reading poetry, even though it was my goal to read 3 poetry books this year, and this was my 3rd one, so I guess I am done with that goal. But yeah, it's a famous work. I've been wanting to read it for years, and I'm glad that I ended up picking it up. So I believe that is all of the books that I've either read in the month of September or that I've tried reading and then ended up DNFing. I am currently loving the books that I'm reading, but I cannot share them with you until I am totally done with them, so I'll probably update you within the next couple of days. But anyway, I guess I will keep you updated, and I will touch back with you in a few days from now. So it's officially 2 days later. It is September 16th, and I actually have finished 2 books just today. I finished 1 physical book and 1 audiobook, and I wanted to share with you the latest books that I recently finished for this month. So no surprise, I ended up picking up Lori Gottlieb's other book, which is called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, A Therapist, Her Therapist, and Our Lives Revealed. Last month I read Marry Him, which was a book that she put out like around 10-ish years ago, and this is her newest book, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's really popular. It's been getting a lot of hype, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I love her writing so much. Like, she might be one of my new favorite authors, and I just want to read everything out there that's by her. But I absolutely love this book because I think therapy, mental health, and psychology are really interesting topics, and as you can tell from the types of books that I read on my channel, I read a lot of books about psychology and relationships because I just find it so fascinating. Basically, let me just get into what this book is actually about. It's kind of hard to explain, but this is a nonfiction book. Lori Gottlieb is a therapist herself. The book chronicles 4 patients that she sees. These patients have a wide different variety of issues that they're dealing with, and she just talks about their progress from when they first came into her office all the way until the end, and you just like watch their own life journey. And even though this book is nonfiction, it honestly does feel like a fiction book because you get so invested and so immersed in the characters and their stories. And on the flip side, when you hear about Lori's patient and their stories, Lori is also going through a tough time herself in her own life after a breakup with her boyfriend, so she decides to seek therapy herself. And it talks a lot about the dynamics of the therapist-patient relationship and what happens when that's actually reversed, when a therapist goes to another therapist and is then a patient. And I just thought this book was so good. I mean, that's all I can really say about it, is just rave about how much I absolutely loved this book. I'm obviously going to give it a 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend, if you're interested in just learning about personal growth and really diving into people's stories, if you like mental health and psychology, or if you're just interested in therapy. I've kind of been like considering, I've wanted to be like a life coach for a while, but then I've also considered like becoming a therapist as well. So this book delves into her journey, like becoming a therapist. But just to give you an example of the types of people: a self-absorbed Hollywood producer, a young newlywed diagnosed with a terminal illness, a senior citizen threatening to end her life on her birthday if nothing gets better, and a 20-something who can't stop hooking up with the wrong guys. So yeah, you kind of just like see like a whole different array of people, and even though these people have such like negative personality quirks, like you still root for them and care for them. And this book just shows you how important it is to see through people's negative parts of their personality and just look at who they really are in their community. But look for more Lori Gottlieb on my channel. Definitely this book is a 5 out of 5 stars. So as for the audiobook that I finished it a few hours ago, and I'm sure you've already read this, or maybe not everyone has read this book, but this was actually a reread for me, and it is The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which that's why I said you probably are already familiar with this book. But I originally read this book in high school, so I was a lot younger, and I was obviously more of the age or the audience that this book is geared towards. But the reread was really great. As I said, listened to it on audio. I thought the audio actor did a phenomenal job. I have to see if the audio actor was like actually in the movie or it was someone else, but I really like how he acted out the main character's voice instead of just like speaking on a monotone. Like when there was a time where he was quoting song lyrics, and instead of just like reading them out, he actually like sang them to you, which is kind of fun. But it's interesting because you don't know a lot about certain things in the book until literally the very, very, very end. So there is a lot of mystery, but the book basically starts out with Charlie, who's the main character. All you know is that in the past he has seen doctors or therapists because he struggles with a mental illness, but I don't think they ever actually say in the book what exact mental illness he struggles from, but you will learn why he does. And he's writing letters. It's written in second person, so he's writing letters. I actually didn't really understand like who he was writing letters to. Like that's like they kind of said it at the end, but I was a little confused about that. But it just talks about like his struggles. He's starting freshman year of high school, and he is kind of like an outcast and like didn't have a lot of friends, and then he meets this group of friends and he starts to create a community with his friends, and then he has a really great relationship with his teacher. And then the book also talks about his relationship with his family and his siblings, and basically just things that everyone kind of goes through in high school, just like navigating life and building relationships. And I wish I was like, again, I feel like I never sell books the way that they're meant to be sold, but this book it tackles like really, really heavy topics, but it's also kind of a feel good in the sense that you feel like you're kind of, I don't know, like you're like BFFs with Charlie just because he's such like a cute character. He's like one of those people that you really want to be friends with, and he's just so honest and kind. And at the very end of the book, like he learns all these things about himself and and I can't spoil it obviously, but himself and like kind of the world. And it was a feel-good read. I will say I always struggle to connect with books when I listen to them on audio versus when I'm physically reading it. So I might have had like a better reading experience if I was physically reading it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know if anyone else has that issue, but this book is hard to rate because if I would have asked my high school self what I would have rated this book, I probably would have said 5 stars. But because I'm a little bit more disconnected from the book now, because I have been in high school for a while, I might say like 4 to 5, but otherwise, really great audiobook. But until I finish another book, I'm already started another book and I'm a good chunk of the way through. I guess until next time. So it is officially October, and I wanted to just wrap up all of the books that I finished the later part of September. So I just have a few books that I wanted to share with you, and I guess I'll just get started with the first one, which is The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less by Barry Schwartz, who is a psychologist, and he talks about how the culture of abundance robs us of our satisfaction. I actually picked up this book because it was mentioned in both Modern Romance and Marry Him, which are 2 books that I've recently read, and they talk a lot about choice and what it's actually like to have too many options, and how most people equate having options with having more freedom, but it actually leads us to make less decisions and not as great decisions. And I just thought this book was really, really interesting, and one of the most interesting concepts that he talks about in this book is the difference between 2 types of people, 1 being a maximizer and 2 being a satisficer. So I just wanted to tell you what he says about those two types of people. And so a maximizer is someone who needs to be assured that every purchase or decision was the best that could be made. And then a satisficer is someone who settles for something that is good enough and not worry about the possibility that there might be something better. So it's like if you walk into a store to buy a sweater, a maximizer is going to want to look at all of the other stores, compare prices, see if there's one that's a better material, a better value. And a satisficer, when they see a sweater that they like, it's in their price range, they'll buy it, no question, and that's it. I picked this book up because I myself am a maximizer, especially in the culture that we live in today with the internet, where there's basically an endless amount of possibilities out there for literally anything you can think of. We have apps and dating apps, and there's just so many options of things and people to choose from, and how he argues that it actually lessens your quality of life and how it actually doesn't enhance your life to have more options. It makes things more confusing. So I really love the subject matter of this book. I thought it was really, really interesting. Even though I really liked what he was talking about in the book, I probably would give this book like a 3.5 stars, just because, it's not super long, but it is, a psychology book. I wish he gave like more stories and examples of different things. Like I felt like his stories were pretty similar and not like super in depth, but it was a really great book. And if you're kind of interested in that subject, either you can read this book or pick up Modern Romance and Marry Him, which are books that talk mostly about this concept when it comes to dating. So the next book that I want to share with you is called Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I had so many high hopes for this book. I really thought that it had all the elements in a book that I was really going to love, but it ultimately kind of fell flat for me. I did still really like certain things in this book, but let me just explain what the book is about. So the book is about this girl named Casey who is 31, and she is dealing with the grief of her mother's death, who died suddenly, and also a really bad breakup that she's recently been through. She is a writer, so she really wants to pursue living a creative life, but in her pursuit of a creative life, she's also a waitress just to try to make ends meet and get by. So what I really liked about this book is the fact that it's about a young person in their career, so she's 31, who is kind of just trying to figure things out and figure out her life and figure out her career, which is something that I think is really, really interesting. And also, I like the idea that we kind of understood, like, what is it actually like to be a creator, to be an artist or a writer, and like the struggles and the sacrifices you have to make for that. This book is also really great about talking about grief, especially a grief of a parent. She goes into a lot of detail about that. And I also like that she talked a lot about Casey's experience working as a waitress. I've worked as a waitress in my early career, so I just thought that was really interesting to see someone else who has a similar experience to me. And in the book, she like has a relationship with like these two guys, which kind of she has to like deal with that too. So, which I actually didn't really care about that part as much. But let me tell you why I didn't like this book. So I didn't love this book because it was, okay, I did like this book. I'd probably give it like a 3-ish stars, maybe like 3.25, but so the book was written in first person, and I just know nothing about the main character at all. All I know about the main character is things that have happened to her, like her mother has passed or she broke up with a boyfriend, but I have absolutely no idea like what her personality is like, who she is, and I just felt like the author really didn't tell me who the main character was. She didn't tell me who any of the other characters were. There would be like these guys, and all you would really know about them is maybe what their job is and, people in their family, but you don't know anything really about their personality. And when I don't have that in a book, I just can't connect with the characters. This book had all of the elements that I was looking for in a book. I just couldn't connect to it, which is why I probably would give it more like closer to a 3 stars. But I read it really quickly. I was like kind of interested in it. I just wish the characters were better thought out. But I do think it is a very relatable topic if you are dealing with grief, are a writer, are confused in your early career, are a creator, or any of that. And I absolutely love the cover of this book. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, this one I'm gonna give a 3-star. Okay, so the next book that I read, I like whizzed through this book. I read it so quickly. I finished it literally yesterday, the last day of September. And that book is Breakfast at Tiffanys by Truman Capote, I think is how you say the last name. I'm sure you've heard of the movie Breakfast at Tiffanys. I've actually never seen the movie, but I obviously knew that like Audrey Hepburn was in it, and it's a very famous movie. So I didn't realize that Breakfast at Tiffanys is actually a short story. So it's around 90 pages. So this is like a compilation of Breakfast at Tiffanys, and then there's also 3 other short stories by the same author. What can I say about this book? I didn't really like it, to be honest. I'd say my favorite short story was the first one, which is funny considering I didn't even love it that much. I thought it wasn't bad, it was just okay. And it's basically about Holly Golightly, who's kind of this like starlet or in like the Hollywood world, and she meets this guy in her apartment building, and it's a lot about like their relationship with each other. So the book is actually, or the story is actually told in a first-person perspective of the guy in the apartment building, which I can't remember his name. And he talks about his experience being friends with her and the things that he learned about her along the way, and all of like the crazy things that she's done and about her past and all of that. So it was like, you know, kind of entertaining. I did like how it was about like a guy and a girl and it wasn't a love story. That was kind of nice. Yeah, I just like didn't really connect with it. I thought it was okay. I think the main reason is because it was set in New York City, which usually always like adds a full star rating to a book, because I just love hearing about like they went horseback riding in Central Park. It's just really fun for me. Or they like lived in a brownstone on the Upper East Side and not you know too far away, and it just that's really fun for me. But I didn't like super connect with it. I'm also like not really into short stories. They never really do it for me. And then the last 3 short stories I just like could care less about, and I honestly just finished this book because it's short, and I added another book to my 2020 reading list. That's literally why I ended up finishing this book. It only took me like a day to read. So that is Breakfast at Tiffanys. I'm curious to see if any of you guys have actually read this book. It's like a classic, and I've like haven't been in a classic mood, so I decided to pick up more of like a modern classic, and it just did not do it for me. I don't know if I want to give this a rating, because I feel bad, because this is like a very highly acclaimed book, and just because it didn't sit well with me, that doesn't mean it's a bad book by any means. Especially with classics, I feel like everyone kind of has like a different opinion on the classics, and it doesn't make it a bad or a good book either way. So yeah, not a fan of Breakfast at Tiffanys, but I guess I would be curious to watch the movie, but I don't even know if I'll actually get around to doing that. But those were the last 3 books that I read in the month of September. I'm hoping to have a better-ish reading month in October. My favorite book that I read this month was, if you can guess, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. I can never remember the actual name of that book, but the one that I like just ranted about how much I loved it like a few minutes ago. I really love that book. But thank you so much for getting to the end of my September wrap-up. Please let me know if you like this kind of format of me doing it over the course of the actual month versus just sitting down at the end of the month and talking about all the books. I'd be really curious to know your feedback on that, or if you like literally don't even care whether I do it one way or the other, just let me know. But thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in my next one.